There are so many awful game engines, but what's the worst? They all have their own pros and cons, but I decided I was going to take some of the worst and try to make some games. And the results, well, you'll see. The first of the worst was Roblox. With 70 million active players, publishing on the platform could instantly get your game in the hands of real players. But how could it be the worst? Well, let's just have a look at it and... yeah. What are all these things? I've used a lot of game engines, but this is just frightening. Not quite as frightening as the awful relationship between game creators and the actual Roblox platform, but that's another video. So I tried to start making a game. The first thing I noticed about the engine is that you have access to tons of pre-made assets. So obviously I grabbed the most expensive looking house and tried to make a city. Yeah, the city definitely had its development cancelled. This helped me to really get a feel for the way you manipulate objects in the world. And it's really the first thing you have to do when exploring a new engine. Once I got bored of driving around my $1 million car that someone else made, I decided to try and make something custom. I had to do some coding. I wanted to try and make a simple button that would send a message to the player. I didn't have a purpose for it because I had no game idea yet, but I thought it could come in handy. And so easy to make, right? Now I think I've got a script attached to an object, and I've got the script open, but I don't know what language this is using or anything about the API, which is just how we communicate between the code and the actual game. I just couldn't work it out, and the documentation is so awful that it really didn't help. So I couldn't code anything. But what I did have was an inbuilt play controller and a bunch of assets made by the community. Now, what kind of game could we make that uses a bunch of pre-made assets that you maneuver around? A Roblox classic. An obby, or obstacle course if you're not a hip, cool Roblox guy like me. I looked through the list and searched around for objects that could tell a story. Something really deep and meaningful, like the hit game Only Up. That's why I put a trail of pigs leading off of dinner tables that came out of a McDonald's. And then metal pipes leading to a half pipe with a Mario pipe on it. Just think about it. Now, one issue I had was some of the pre-made assets didn't quite fit together, but since most of them are made out of basic cubes and spheres and made inside of Roblox, I can just remove the parts I don't like the staircase that leads up to the treehouse, because that would just be too boring and easy. And with that issue out of the way, there was something a little bit more important. The objects kept falling from the sky when I would press play. Obviously, there had to be a solution to this, otherwise why would some of them be floating and some of them falling? But I looked everywhere and I could not find a single button that said something like static, or a slider that decided its gravity. I spent around an hour looking for a solution when it turns out there is a button. It's called locked. When you want to lock an object so that it doesn't move, obviously. That's the standard. Of course. It makes sense. Yeah, sure, Roblox. That. The final and arguably most important step of making any Roblox game: microtransactions. Collectibles that will just teleport you to the end of the map. Cosmetics that do nothing. Or abilities that make you ruin other people's day. But seeing as I couldn't even get any code stuff to work, it obviously didn't work out. And I, unfortunately, will not be making any money from this game. And with that said, I pressed publish and released my game to Roblox. You could go play it to steal server space from Roblox, just like they steal money from their creators. Now look, Roblox, it's great if you're trying to make an obstacle course, but if you're trying to make anything else, you might actually need to learn how the engine works. And at that point, just learn Godot. Alright, one engine down. What's next? Surely it's something awful that no game could ever be made in something terrible, something that will ruin your day if you even have to think about using it. Scratch is a game engine made for kids and definitely doesn't meet that criteria. Now I have to admit, I do have some history with this engine, creating some interesting experiences, but I've never made a real game. So now's the time to flex my game making skills and show I can make something awesome with a kid's toy. We just need to get something going. My first thought was a whack-a-mole type game where things randomly pop up and you click them and get points, but it's been done. We're professional game developers. We want danger, we want violence, we want saw blades. So I made some. Using the inbuilt art system, I drew up a saw blade in the background. The only problem I had was with the fill tool and how it recognized lines and did some weird layers, but I could have made the art in any program and imported it, so it's really not a problem. The blades bounce around the screen, so we need to add a player to avoid them. The programming was super straightforward and felt like it was made for these kind of arcadey games. I couldn't imagine making a platformer in it, but people have made 2D Minecraft, so it's clearly capable. Now, something I couldn't find in Scratch was the ability to parent items, which is basically a way of connecting them. Like a folder system, it can keep your project organized, and in most engines, if you move a parent, it'll move the child. Like how a moon orbiting a planet will always move with that planet, but then moves on its own in relation to that. And, well, in Scratch, it seems like you have to manually set these positions as opposed to telling the engine who owns who. Doesn't make things impossible without it, but it can make that hard, especially with bigger projects. Now I just press publish and let the players roll in. Weird. Now, something I noticed about Scratch and Roblox is that there's so much slop that it's almost impossible to get your games played or viewed or noticed without some external factor. Just like YouTube, you need a good title and thumbnail to get people to click, which I seriously underestimated. It also seems like there's no real For You page that will randomly push zero viewer games or just released games, which sucks. But good thing I've got you, so you can go and play my games and tell me what you think. Also, I know they're not getting views because they're completely terrible games, don't worry. Alright, the final game engine. What is it? What else could qualify for the worst engine in the world? PowerPoint. All I can really do without going God mode like these developers is make a little choose your own adventure game. Oh wow, look at that. What an engine. Maybe with some graphics I could actually make a real point and click adventure game, but that seems like pushing the limits. So those were the worst engines. Well, not really. It all depends on what you're trying to make. If you do want to get into game development and have no idea what you're doing, I'd say use Scratch or dive into Unreal Engine. But if you know the basics of Python, you should definitely go and use Godot, which is where I'm making my Metroidvania that you should go check out right here. And you know what else you should do? You should subscribe.